In just 38 seconds, what started as a simple conversation about Hollywood turned into one of the most explosive meltdowns in late-night television history. A complete destruction of professionalism. A total breakdown between host and guest that left the studio audience gasping, and cameras still rolling as security had to step in. This is what happened when Mark Wahlberg sat down with Bill Maher last night, and it got ugly fast. The lights were bright in the studio as Mark Wahlberg walked out to cheers from the crowd. He was there to talk about his newest movie, his production company, and his life in Hollywood. He smiled, waved to the audience, and sat down in the guest chair across from Bill Maher. The applause died down. Bill leaned back in his chair with that smirk he always has, the one that says he knows something you don't. "Mark, great to have you here," Bill said, shuffling his note cards. "You're looking good. Still doing those 4 a.m. workouts?" Mark laughed. "Every single day, man. It's how I stay focused." "Well, you certainly look the part," Bill continued. "But let me ask you something. You've been in Hollywood for what, 3 decades now? You've seen it all. Don't you think this whole town has gotten a little too sensitive? Everyone walking on eggshells?" The audience made a few sounds, half laughing, half unsure where this was going. Mark shifted in his seat, his smile getting a bit tighter. "I don't know if I'd say that," Mark replied carefully. "I think people are just trying to be more respectful. That's not a bad thing." Bill waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, come on, Mark. You grew up in Boston, right? Dorchester? You know what real life is like. Not everyone needs a safe space and a participation trophy. Sometimes people need to hear the truth, even if it hurts their feelings." Mark's jaw tensed. You could see it. The muscles in his face went tight. "Yeah, I grew up in Dorchester, and I learned that respect matters. Being tough doesn't mean being an asshole to people." A few people in the audience gasped, others clapped. Bill's smirk got wider. "Ooh, we've got tough guy Mark tonight," Bill said, talking to the audience like Mark wasn't even there. "Look, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." Hollywood used to be about talent and guts. Now it's about who can cry the loudest about being offended. Mark leaned forward now, his elbows on his knees. "That's not fair, Bill. People aren't crying about being offended. They're asking to be treated like human beings. There's a difference." "Is there, though?" Bill shot back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a bunch of millionaires complaining about their feelings while the rest of the country has real problems. You used to be a guy who understood that." The energy in the room changed. It was like the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Mark stared at Bill for a long moment, not saying anything. The audience was dead silent. You could hear the cameras humming. "What's that supposed to mean?" Mark asked, his voice low and controlled. Bill shrugged like he was talking about the weather. "It means you used to be authentic, Mark. Now you're like everyone else in this town. Playing it safe. Saying the right things. Being politically correct because God forbid someone on Twitter gets upset." "You don't know what the hell you're talking about," Mark said, his voice getting louder. "I've worked my ass off my entire life. I came from nothing. I've made mistakes, I've owned them, and I've tried to be better. That's not being politically correct. That's called being a decent person." Bill laughed, actually laughed, and looked at the audience like he was inviting them to join in. Some people did. Others stayed quiet. "A decent person," Bill repeated. "That's rich coming from someone who beat a man half to death when he was a kid. But sure, let's talk about decency." The studio went completely silent. Even the crew members froze. Mark's face turned red. His eyes went dark, and he stood up from his chair. "Don't you ever," Mark said, pointing his finger at Bill, his voice shaking with anger. "Don't you ever bring that up like you know me. I was 16 years old. I was a kid who made a terrible, terrible mistake. I've apologized. I've worked to make amends. I've spent my whole adult life trying to be better. And you're going to sit there and throw it in my face for what? For ratings? For laughs?" Bill didn't stand up. He just sat there with his arms crossed, that damn smirk still on his face. "I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy, Mark. You want to lecture me about being decent while you've got a past like that. Maybe you should get off your high horse." "My high horse?" Mark's voice was getting louder now, echoing through the studio. "You sit here every week talking down to people, acting like you're smarter than everyone else, making fun of anyone who doesn't agree with you. You're a bully, Bill. That's all you are. A bully with a microphone." The audience was completely divided now. Half of them were clapping and cheering for Mark. The other half were booing or sitting in shocked silence. Bill finally stood up, his face getting red too. "Oh, I'm a bully?" Bill said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's funny coming from you. At least I use my words. I don't go around attacking people in the street." Mark took a step toward Bill's desk. A producer off camera stood up, ready to intervene if needed. "That was 40 years ago," Mark shouted. "I was a messed up kid from a broken neighborhood. I've done everything I can to make up for it. But you hurt people every single week and you think you're some kind of hero for it." Bill's smirk finally disappeared. He looked genuinely angry now. "I speak truth to power, Mark. I call out BS when I see it. If that hurts people's feelings, maybe they need thicker skin." "No, Bill," Mark said, his voice quieter now but somehow more intense. "You punch down. You make fun of people who can't fight back. You hide behind comedy and free speech, but really you're just a bitter guy who gets off on making other people feel small. That's not speaking truth. That's just being cruel." Bill stepped out from behind his desk now. The two men were standing face to face, maybe 10 feet apart. The cameras were still rolling. The audience didn't know whether to watch or look away. "You think I'm cruel?" Bill said, his voice getting louder. "I'm cruel for pointing out that your whole nice guy act is fake? Everyone knows you've got a temper, Mark. Everyone knows you're not the saint you pretend to be. I'm just the only one with the balls to say it on television." Mark's hands curled into fists at his sides. He wasn't threatening Bill, but you could see every muscle in his body was tense, like he was using all his self-control not to explode. "My nice guy act?" Mark said slowly. "I don't have an act, Bill. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a guy who tries to do the right thing even when it's hard. And yeah, I'm not perfect. I never said I was. But at least I'm trying. What are you doing except tearing people down for entertainment?" "Entertainment?" Bill laughed harshly. "This whole industry is entertainment, Mark. You're an entertainer. You pretend to be other people for a living. And you're gonna stand there and tell me I'm fake? There's a difference between playing a character in a movie and being a character in real life, Bill." Mark shot back. "You've been playing this smug, arrogant jerk for so long, I don't think you remember who you really are anymore, if you ever knew." The audience was getting louder now, people shouting support for one side or the other. A security guard moved closer to the stage area, just in case. Bill's face was completely red now. He pointed at Mark. "You know what? I don't need this. I don't need some hypocrite actor coming on my show and preaching to me about morality. You're the one with the criminal record, remember? You're the one who had to apologize to the Vietnamese community because of what you did." Mark's jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might break. "I'm not ashamed of apologizing, Bill. I'm ashamed of what I did, but I'm proud that I owned it and tried to make it right. That's what adults do. They take responsibility. They don't just sit behind a desk throwing stones at everyone else while pretending they're perfect." "I never said I was perfect," Bill yelled. "But I don't go around pretending to be something I'm not." "Neither do I," Mark yelled back. "I'm exactly who I am. A guy from Boston who made it out, who made mistakes, who's trying every day to be a good father and a good man." "What are you, Bill? Who are you when the cameras stop rolling? Do you even know?" Bill stepped closer. His producer was definitely paying attention now, ready to jump in. "I know I'm not a fraud. I know I don't sell some fake image to make myself look good. I say what I mean. And I mean what I say. Consequences be damned." "Yeah, and those consequences are other people's feelings? Other people's lives?" Mark said, his voice getting intense again. "You think it makes you brave to not care about hurting people? It doesn't. It makes you selfish. It makes you small." "Small?" Bill's eyes went wide. "You're calling me small? You're a actor, Mark. You play make-believe for a living. You're not a doctor, you're not a soldier, you're not anyone important. You're just another celebrity who thinks because people watch your movies, your opinion matters." "And what does that make you?" Mark fired back. "You're a talk show host. You interview celebrities and make jokes. Don't act like you're some kind of important political figure. You're entertainment too, Bill. The only difference is you're mean entertainment." The audience was in complete chaos now. People were standing up, shouting, some trying to leave, others pulling out their phones to record. The producer was definitely walking toward the stage now. Bill's voice was shaking with anger. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've interviewed presidents, senators, Nobel Prize winners. I've influenced actual policy. What have you done? Made a few action movies? I've employed hundreds of people, Mark shouted. I've built businesses in my community. I've donated millions to charity. I've tried to use whatever platform I have to help people, not hurt them. That's the difference between us, Bill. You tear down, I build up. Oh, you build up? Bill said mockingly. Is that what you call those terrible Transformers movies? Building up? You sold out years ago, Mark. You became exactly what you're accusing me of being, a fake. That was it. That was the moment. Mark's whole body language changed. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was done. You know what, Bill? Screw this. Screw you. Mark ripped off the small microphone that was clipped to his shirt and threw it on the floor. The sound made a horrible screech through the speakers. I don't need to sit here and be insulted by some bitter old man who gets his kicks from being an asshole to people. Oh, you're leaving? Bill said, sounding almost pleased with himself. Can't handle a real conversation? Can't handle someone who doesn't kiss your ass? Mark walked toward the edge of the stage, then turned back. This isn't a conversation, Bill. A conversation is two people talking with respect. This is just you being a bully because you think it makes good TV. Well, congratulations. You got your drama, you got your viral moment. But you lost any respect I might have had for you. I don't need your respect, Bill called after him. I don't need respect from someone who— I'm done, Mark interrupted, his voice echoing through the studio. I'm done with you. I'm done with this show. And I'm done pretending like any of this matters. You want to keep sitting here acting superior? Go ahead, but do it without me. The audience was going absolutely crazy now. Some people were chanting Mark's name, others were booing. The producer was on stage now, trying to signal to Bill to wrap it up, but Bill ignored him. That's right, walk away, Bill shouted, even as Mark was heading toward the exit. That's what you do when you can't win an argument. You run. Mark stopped. He turned around one more time, his face filled with anger and disappointment. I'm not running, Bill. I'm walking away from someone who's not worth my time. There's a difference. I hope someday you figure that out. I hope someday you realize that being mean doesn't make you smart, and being controversial doesn't make you brave. It just makes you lonely. With that, Mark turned and walked straight toward the exit. The cameras followed him. You could hear Bill starting to say something else, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos in the audience. Security guards opened the door for Mark as he approached, and he walked right through it without looking back. Bill stood on the stage, his face still red, his hands shaking slightly. The producer was next to him now, clearly telling him to go to commercial, but Bill just stood there. For the first time since the show started, he didn't look smug or confident. He looked rattled. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds before finally cutting away. But everyone in that studio knew what they'd just witnessed. They'd seen a real confrontation, not a scripted bit. They'd seen a guest walk off set in the middle of a live show. They'd seen Bill Maher pushed to a place he'd never been before. The show cut to commercial, but the damage was done. In those 38 seconds that started everything, then the minutes that followed, a simple appearance had turned into one of the most talked about moments in talk show history. Mark Wahlberg had had enough, and he'd made sure everyone knew it. As Mark walked down the hallway backstage, his hands still shaking from adrenaline, he could hear the muffled sounds of the chaos he'd left behind. Staff members stared at him as he passed, not sure what to say. His publicist rushed up to him, phone already out, no doubt seeing the social media explosion happening in real time. Mark, are you okay? She asked, trying to keep up with his fast pace. I'm fine, Mark said, not slowing down. Get me out of here. Now. Behind him, back in the studio, Bill Maher was still on stage as they came back from commercial. His producer had clearly talked to him during the break, told him to smooth it over, make a joke, move on. But Bill's face showed something different. He looked shaken, genuinely thrown off for maybe the first time in his career. Well, Bill started, his voice not quite as confident as usual. That was unexpected. Some of the audience laughed nervously. Most just stared. Mark Wahlberg, everyone, Bill continued, trying to regain his composure. Apparently, he doesn't like being challenged. Who knew? But the joke fell flat. Even his most loyal audience members weren't really laughing. They'd all seen what happened. They'd all heard the words exchanged, and something about it felt different than the usual heated debates Bill had on his show. This felt personal. This felt real. This felt like Bill had pushed someone too far and didn't know how to handle it when they pushed back. Bill tried to continue with his show, bringing out his panel guests, making his jokes, doing his usual routine, but everyone could tell he was rattled. His timing was off. His confidence was shaken. And every few minutes, you could see him glance toward the empty chair where Mark had been sitting, like he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Outside the studio, Mark was already in a car, heading away from the building. His phone was blowing up with calls and texts. His team, his family, his friends, everyone wanted to know what happened, if he was okay, what he was thinking. But Mark just stared out the window, his jaw still tight, his hands still clenched. He'd meant every word he said. He'd been holding that in for years, watching Bill Maher and people like him use their platforms to hurt people under the guise of just being honest or telling it like it is. He'd watched them dress up cruelty as courage, watched them call meanness refreshing. And he'd finally had enough. Back in the studio, as Bill's show continued to limp toward its conclusion, the staff backstage were already dealing with the fallout. Producers were on phones, trying to figure out how to handle this. Social media managers were watching the videos spread like wildfire across every platform. Legal teams were being consulted. This wasn't just a heated exchange, this was a disaster. When the show finally ended, Bill walked off stage without his usual banter with the crew. He went straight to his dressing room and closed the door. His producers gave him a few minutes before knocking, knowing they needed to talk about what had just happened, what it meant for the show, how they were going to handle the inevitable media storm. But in that moment, sitting alone in his dressing room, Bill Maher was quiet. The smirk was gone. The confidence was shaken, because for all his years of being controversial, of pushing buttons and stirring up trouble, he'd never quite had someone push back the way Mark Wahlberg had. He'd never had someone call him out so completely, so honestly, so publicly. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Mark Wahlberg was pulling up to his house, ready to explain to his family what happened, ready to deal with whatever came next. But he didn't regret it. Not one word. Because sometimes, standing up to a bully is worth whatever consequences follow. The confrontation was over, but its impact was just beginning. Within hours, every news outlet, every social media platform, every entertainment show would be talking about what happened. People would take sides. They'd debate who was right and who was wrong. They'd analyze every word, every gesture, every moment. But for Mark, walking into his house and hugging his family, it was simple. He'd stood up for what he believed in. He'd refused to let someone tear him down for entertainment. He'd walked away from toxicity when staying would have meant compromising his values. And Bill Maher? He'd learned that after years of dishing it out, sometimes it comes back around. Sometimes the person sitting across from you decides they've had enough. Sometimes the guest becomes the host, and the conversation becomes something you can't control. The show was over. The cameras had stopped rolling. But the story of what happened when Mark Wahlberg sat down with Bill Maher would be told and retold for years to come. It would be remembered as the night a celebrity said no to the toxicity, the night someone walked away from the drama instead of feeding into it, the night Bill Maher met someone who wouldn't play his games. And it all happened in just 38 seconds, when a simple question turned into something so much bigger.